F-1 students arrive in the United States and are exposed to unfamiliar territory that is accompanied by American norms, traditions, and a university culture structured by institutional and national policies. The values in this new society may heavily conflict with the student's upbringing, sending them on a one-way flight back home and a terminated service record. My name is Deanna Stokes, and today I will take you on a journey down the long road to discipline, where we will explore the implications of violating F-1 status. First, we will define an F-1 student in order to better understand institutional policies, following a brief discussion on common status violations, which will lead to disciplinary action steps for academic and non-academic status violations, and how that impacts the F-1 status. And finally, we will conclude with opportunities to learn. So, who exactly is an F-1 student, and how does that classification differ from other classifications? Well, F-1 students are non-immigrants who are pursuing a full course of study. The primary objective for studying in the U.S. is to basically achieve a goal, whether it's educational or professional. This classification is governed by the Immigration and Nationality Act and has regulations and requirements that must be fulfilled, including maintaining a full course load throughout the duration of their program and making normal progress. In the current political climate of the U.S., it is far easier to violate immigration status because of the various restrictions. Here we have two of the most common violations to F-1 status, which includes failing to attain good academic standing, which is typically a 2.0 at most institutions, and enrolling less than full time. Academic misconduct is also very common, as seen in the case of Lee versus the University of Tulsa. Lee was a student enrolled at the university who was brought before the court for academic misconduct. Prior to seeking preliminary injunction, there were 3 counts of academic misconduct claims, ranging from striking similarities between Lee and another student's work to using an unauthorized calculator, which led to accusations of cheating. Lee claims that a language barrier played a role in this case, which requires us to assess and evaluate the role of culture in academic misconduct. In Chinese culture, academic misconduct, such as plagiarism and copying, is considered as a pedagogical practice, where it is not only the norm, but expected for students. According to BISTA, this is a common practice amongst other international students from non-Western countries, where their learning attitudes are culturally influenced by beliefs and behaviors from years of schooling at their home university, and it appears that they may be unable to alter those in the American classroom. In this case, that claim wasn't sufficient, and Lee's violation of the University of Tulsa's policy and procedures relating to academic misconduct resulted in a series of disciplinary action. So, what exactly are the disciplinary action steps for academic violations? Well, each institution has their own set of policies that structure the disciplinary process, which typically follows these steps. First is an academic warning, then probation, following suspension, and finally, dismissal. The designated school official, also known as the DSO, updates service records when disciplinary action is taken by the university, which impacts F-1 status in various capacities. Now, let's dive into the pool of discipline to explore the implications and impact of violating the F-1 status. First is the academic warning, typically given to students who are not in good standing, which we previously defined as having a 2.0 GPA. There's essentially no effect on the F-1 status if a student receives an academic warning, especially at the conclusion of their first term, though this should still be taken very seriously. Most institutions require that students meet with an international student advisor or the dean of the college. Though Lee's case is an issue of academic misconduct, Lee received a warning where there was a meeting with the dean and Lee was given an acknowledgement form to sign. Next, we have academic probation. Unlike an academic warning, probation is typically given when the GPA falls below a 1.5 after a certain number of semester or quarter hours, and deems the student as ineligible to hold elective offices in student organizations without special permission. This action is unique because, according to the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services and the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement as of 2003, poor academic performance is not an indicator that a student is not meeting the normal progress requirement, as long as the student is enrolled in attending class. In short, probation threatens F-1 status if the DSO acknowledges that the student is not making normal progress, in addition to the student not being able to continue enrollment on a full-time basis. Next, we have academic suspension. When an international student is suspended, the DSO must update SEVIS and indicate if the student is allowed to continue enrollment. If the student is able to enroll, it is mandatory that their course load is reduced as a result of poor academic performance. This conflicts with the requirements of maintaining F-1 status because the visa requires that students are pursuing a full course of study towards an educational goal, unless there is an exception. Students who are placed on academic probation or suspension and request a program extension will be denied unless there are other academic and medical reasons as support. F-1 students who are not granted a program extension and are under academic suspension are subject to dismissal and having their service record terminated by the DSO. At the end of the long road to disciplinary action, we have dismissal. Being dismissed from a U.S. higher education institution as an international student can be a painful experience, especially if the student is from a culture that prioritizes merit and high scholastics. Their service record is terminated and they are considered a non-immigrant. At this point, students have three options. The first option is to request to change their non-immigrant status by applying for reinstatement once the DSO takes action with the service record. This can be approved or denied and is up to the institution. The second option is to request a transfer to another school, which the student must first receive admission. In the case of Lee utilized this option when Lee was dismissed from the University of Tulsa and transferred to an English school. In order for this option to be successful, the DSO at the initial institution must terminate the record, which a transfer cannot be done until that process is complete, and then the transfer institution must create a new service record for the student no later than 30 days after the start of the program. They will also issue an I-20 with the transfer school's information on it. The third option is to leave the U.S. immediately, which includes any dependents. Most violations are definitely academic in nature, but there are a few that take place outside of the classroom that can result in a change in status due to the disciplinary action steps. Here we have the top 3 non-academic violations an F-1 student can commit. In no particular order, includes engaging in unauthorized employment, such as working off campus and under the table, submitting fraudulent documentation, such as financial documents relying on an application, and entering a marriage scam to obtain a green card. A marriage scam is suspected once a student reaches the later steps of the disciplinary action and all of a sudden is married to a U.S. citizen. These acts are harder to catch, but once the DSO gets a hold of this information, they must report it, and it can lead to the termination of a service record, and the non-immigrant and dependents have to leave immediately. There is light at the end of the tunnel because there are always opportunities to learn. Cultural background and language barriers play a huge role in understanding the requirements of the F-1 status and the way that information is distributed. In order to provide a thorough understanding, there has to be an emphasis on communication that is guided by cultural awareness. Whether violations are academic or non-academic, the DSO must report these violations, make decisions that reflect the institutional and national policies while keeping integrity, and maintaining the best interests of the student. Institutions should have ongoing trainings for F-1 students to familiarize themselves with the intricate detail of the F-1 visa and to identify resources to better support comprehension to avoid a long walk down the road of a dreadful disciplinary process due to violation. Ultimately, experiencing higher education in the U.S. can be a student's best decision or worst nightmare, and their experience is heavily influenced by the presence of the basic knowledge of immigration and legal issues in higher education.